Hi again. Let's talk more about Parse. So in my last example, I created this form here that lets us, create new records and save them to our database, right? So, I'll type in banana and give it a price, and then I'll hit submit. And when I look at my Parse database here, you can see there's a new record, banana 553. Okay, so our form is working. It's uploading new records. What if we wanted to see these records displayed on the page? So, so far we're adding new records to the database, but our script here is not getting records from the database, and that would be the other thing that we would want to do. So let's do this. So now I've got this set up like we did in the earlier videos, right? We're importing jQuery, we're importing the Parse library, and then we're initializing Parse here, and then we have some code to handle our form. So let's imagine, I want to put some stuff in the page here, so I'll have to make a location to do that. So I have this form here. Maybe I'll put a div below it, and then I'm going to put a comment here, so all the products are going to go right there. And then what we'll do is we'll give this an ID, and you can name it anything. I'm going to just call it products, right? So I'll know that the products go there, okay? So how do we get to the products? Well, let's write another little block of code here, okay? Maybe I'll put this up here above the bit that works with the form, right? So what are we going to do? Let's wrap our code in a function. I'm going to say get products, okay? And so we'll put this code in a function here, and then to activate the code, we can call on our function, right? Okay, and then if we need to go get the call on this again to refresh our page or something, we can call the function again. So it's kind of nice to have the code in the function. So how is this going to work? Well, the first thing we're going to do is we're going to make a copy of the test object. And I'm using the uppercase here. And we're going to do the same thing we did down below here. And we'll say parse dot object extend, right? And then we name our table here, and that's key. Okay, the name that we type in here needs to be exactly the same name as the table that we want to grab the data from. Okay, and yes, case matters. So if that table name uses uppercase letters, we got to use those same uppercases here. Okay, so next we're going to make a query, okay, or a query object. So I'll say, I'll just make a variable called query, and then what we'll do is we'll say parse dot query, okay? Actually, I made a mistake here. We got to say new parse query. And then in here, we're going to type in test object, okay? So we're going to create a new query that's querying the table test object, okay? And to find records from this query, we'll say query.find, okay? And then this is going to follow the same pattern that we used with save. So what we'll do is we'll make a JavaScript object that has two properties. Success, which will be a function as its value, and error, which will have a function as its value. Okay, so I'll just write those out, just the whole thing, make sure I don't miss any of these curly brackets, make sure we type all the pairs. And then, I'll kind of arrange it the same way I did before. So I'll just hit return here, and then I'll put a return here like that. So that kind of reads nicely. And the success object is going to, or the success function is going to receive some results. So we're going to create a query, we're going to find that query, and then we're going to get some results from the query if we're successful. And if we're not successful, we're going to get an error. So if we get an error, we'll do the same thing we did before. We'll say console.log and then we'll say, query error, and then we'll do error dot message. Okay, so then the message will hopefully tell us something useful about what might have gone wrong with our query. And then over here for the results is an array, and so it'll be an array of parse objects. Okay, so this will be a little more work. Why don't we just do a little test here first? So we'll say console.log, and then we'll say results dot length. Well, if it's an array, right, it always has a length property, and that tells you how many items are in the array, right? So if this shows up with a number, then we'll know it should be exactly the same number of records we have in the table. Maybe why don't we do this? Let's put results in front of that, and we'll see that in the console, right? So there we go. Let's save that, and then we'll go to our page here and hit return. I'll refresh it, right? And then we'll get the console here, and it looks like it says results is 7, right? Well, let's take a look at our table, and you can see I've got 7 records, right? It tells me 7 right there. Okay, so I'm gonna go out on a limb and say I think it's working. Okay, so now how do we print those results on our page? Well, since it's an array, what we'll want to do is we'll want to loop through all the items in the array. So what we're going to do is we're going to start with a for loop. So I'll say for parentheses, curly brackets, and then I'm going to put a variable in here called I, and that's going to be the index of each item in the array. So I'll say in, var I in results. And then what I want to do is for convenience, what I'm going to do is I'm going to get the name and the price for every record, okay? And we'll just print it to the console, but it'll be easier for us if we just make a variable to hold each one of those things first. So I'll say name equals results bracket I. So whenever you get an element from an array, you say the array name followed by the square brackets, and then you put the index of the element that you want. So if this was 0, we'd get the first item in the array. If I was 1, we'd get the second one. And the way the for loop is set up here, I is going to count from 1 to the number of items in the, or from 0 to the 1 less than the number of items in the array, but it's going to get it essentially all the indexes. So if I get this object here, essentially every item at each index of the array is a parse object, and in order to get the values from the parse object, we need to say get, okay? And then we're going to name the item that we want, or the field. So for example, my table has a name field in it. So if I want the name field, I'm going to put name here. Let's take a look. Let's kind of compare that to what I have over here, right? So I'm saying, name equals results bracket I. That's going to give me the first parse object. And then if I say get name, that's going to give me the value of this field. And if I wanted to get the price, I could say price is results bracket I dot get price. Okay. And so next, let's print that stuff out to the console. So I'll say console log, let's do name, and price, okay? Maybe I'll take out those spaces to make it a little easier to read. Okay, so there we go. Let's save it and we'll test it again. So I'll go to the browser here and refresh, and then I see all of my records. Okay, that's pretty easy. So now let's try and put them on the page, okay? So as the last step here, we need to write something to the page. So just to keep it simple, I'll just make something really simple. We'll just put like a paragraph or something, right, with the name and the price in it, okay? So outside of the loop, I'm going to make a variable to hold the string that I will write into this div called products up here, okay? So I'm going to make a variable here above the for loop, okay, because I want this to start here. If I put it in here, it's going to be set to the empty string each time we loop, right? But instead, what I want to do is I want to essentially put this into, the empty string and kind of append it, right? So I'm going to say output plus equals. That means add to. So every time we loop, we're going to add another element to this output, okay? And then maybe I'll put a paragraph tag here. And then in the middle of the paragraph tag, I'll close the string, use the plus sign to concatenate the name, and then maybe I'll do it again here and include the price. Okay, so there we go, we'll get name and price. And then after the for loop, which happens after this curly brace, so we're going to run through all the code here once for each item in our results, 7 in our case, right? And then after we're done, we're going to continue down, and to write something into the page with jQuery, we'll name the element, so in our case, the products div, right? And then we'll say .html, okay? And so that replaces everything inside, the inner HTML of this element with whatever we put here, which in our case wants to be output. Okay, so essentially, we started with an empty string, we appended, various, paragraph strings to the empty string, and then we put the empty string into the HTML of this element. Okay, so let's save that, and then we'll refresh, and then you can see here are all of my products on my page, right? So that wasn't too bad, right? Pretty easy if you've done this kind of back-end stuff with a database using PHP and MySQL and PHP MyAdmin, you're probably going to see this and think like, wow, that's kind of a lot easier. They kind of did a lot of work for us. And then when we get into using images and other stuff, you'll see that it's even easier. There's a lot of stuff that they do that you would have to take care of and kind of handle specially, right? So I think this is a really great tool. I would encourage anybody to give this a try for some projects, okay? Anyway, I hope you enjoyed that, and we'll do some more in the future.